Welcome to this debate featuring 4 of this year's candidates for the office of Governor of California. My name is Brian Carroll. I was a candidate for President of the United States in 2020, nominated by the American Solidarity Party. I will be moderating this debate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and we will rotate each candidate or rotate whichever candidate begins the answers. Each candidate can twice ask for an extra minute, either to continue an answer for which they were currently in the middle of, or to present an afterthought once the others have spoken. And I will hope to keep the timer going here where people can see it. If we can get 4 candidates through 1 question every 10 minutes, it is reasonable to think that we can deal with opening and closing statements and another 10 questions in 2 hours. So the first question, I would like each candidate to introduce themselves and to tell us what you believe is the most important issue facing California. And we will go ahead and start this with Reinette.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. This is a great pleasure to be speaking today and debating on behalf of California citizens and constituents. I am from Nevada City, California, and I'm a 2-term city council member and mayor. And for the last nearly 20 years, I've been working towards making my community more resilient towards rough future or hard times. And it was actually in 2020 of July that I actually stepped down before starting my 3rd term, and I just completed being a mayor when COVID had hit. And I did this because of what I would call COVID narrative that was quite alarming that I was seeing behind the scenes. And the reason why I decided to throw my name into the hat was because I had been watching politics backslide within California for many, many years. And I've been very concerned about the lack of representation, as well as the amount of big money in politics. So I am running because I believe in ensuring that our children have a future and their children's children. I also believe that we need to have a transparent government. I also believe in the rule of law and returning that. And I also believe that it's time we actually do a certified audit on all the books in California, the state of California, as well as an operational audit as well. And so I'm giving myself to the state of California. I have a lot of skills. I'm intrepid. I'm a good leader. I'm creative. I consider myself a solutionarian. That's what I've been doing in my small town of Nevada City for many, many years, is identifying the problems and then finding the solutions, clearing the path so my constituents from point A to point B. And at this point in time, I believe that we have the ability to scale up these solutions statewide and actually return governance to its proper place and representation as well. So I want to thank all of you for this opportunity for me to address some of the most pressing questions in California and to debate that today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And next is Robert.
I'm Robert Newman, the candidate for Governor, State of California. My background is in education and university teaching and empirical research, which specifically then prepares me for this COVID, immunology, vaccination, masks, and so on. I did spend some time in medical school and prefer to get a PhD. That's my background. My wife and I own a small farm. We've been in agriculture all of our lives. And I'm a member of the Farm Bureau here in California and in the county of Riverside. Concerning the issues that confront the people of the state of California that I will address is that I'm emphatic about jurisdictional limits. That is to say, the governor has limits that have been far exceeded in this with our current governor, and that the governor and all the other executive branches must stay within the bounds of what the state constitution clearly states. So I'm opposed to mandates. I'm opposed to government telling us what to do. We need to reduce taxes. We need to reduce regulations. not just in agriculture, but in industry and in education, whether that's elementary through the university level. So I've seen my time. I appreciate this opportunity. God bless.
Thank you. And the next speaker is James.
Hello, I'm Jim Hanink. I'm from Inglewood with two NFL teams. We've become Concussion City. My wife and I are about to celebrate our 54th wedding anniversary. Our large family, like our neighborhood, is racially diverse. Why am I running for governor? To advance the platform of the American Solidarity Party. Our party is growing, and it's pro-life for the whole of life. We are progressive in the best sense. We want to make progress toward a common good built on solidarity, decentralism, and economic democracy. I'm not a politician or a policy wonk, but I do have plenty of experience. For the past 45 years, I've been a California resident. I taught philosophy, including political philosophy, for 40 years at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. Now I'm video casting, blogging, and doing what I can to walk the walk. Maybe our state once reflected the American dream, but now it exports a primal scream. California is just another venue for political power struggles. Money calls the shots. So the most critical issue facing Californians is how we can best develop the virtue of civic harmony. In doing so, we will succeed in such a way as to promote the flourishing of each and every human being. No one is shut out, no one is thrown away. I also have a promise to make. Today's political talk is prepackaged and dumbed down. I will avoid such nonsense and call out those who practice it.
And the next one is Leo.
I'm Leo Zacky. I'm running for governor in California because my family business, Zacky Farms, which at one point was the largest privately owned employer in the state of California, as well as arguably the largest poultry producer on the West Coast, was destroyed by California policy. I was a lobbyist for the California Poultry Federation for about 7 years while I was working at my family's company. And I got the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and Sacramento several times a year and meet with senators, congressmen, state representatives, the USDA, and the FDA. And I quickly discovered that there is a vast array of corruption and incompetence in our government. And it was very disheartening to discover that. California has just been on the receiving end of poor legislative policy for decades, and we're seeing the results right now. You're seeing charter schools popping up because our education system is in shambles. The never-ending drought has no end in sight, and our farmers are bearing the brunt of it. You're seeing lots of small farmers go out of business, and the economy is in a horrible state because of it. We have to target corruption by exposing it here in California. We also have a huge issue with the homeless crisis, and I actually bring solutions for the homeless crisis. So I'd like to be able to implement that by treating the source of the cause, which is drug addiction and mental health crisis, compounded with the high cost of living. For too long, Californians have just been living under the brunt of, again, poor policy. So by bringing in young, business-minded, agricultural background like myself, I know that we can come forward together and tackle all of our issues. Thank you.
Second question. We invited several of the candidates who ran for president in 2020 to submit questions for this. And the one question that we received was from the Green Party candidate, Howie Hawkins. And this is his question. Do you support replacing the top two voting system with ranked choice voting in party primaries and in the general election for statewide candidates, and with proportional representation for the legislature through ranked choice voting in multi-member districts. And we will start this time with Robert.
I think basically the system that we had, that is one Republican, one Democrat, etc., worked okay. I think the top two doesn't work particularly well, but when there's integrity and honesty in any system, the system works. It's fair to everyone. They realize what they're doing and respond appropriately. When there's loss of integrity in the election system, we are in serious trouble. I don't think anyone would question that we are in serious trouble nationally and in the state of California because the integrity of the voting process has been severely compromised. That basically is my position. Thank you.
Okay, and James.
Yes, I surely do, and so does the American Solidarity Party. Ranked choice voting and proportional representation lead to greater participation. This in turn leads to a deeper and wider democracy. The current winner-take-all system shortchanges real participatory democracy. Result, big money, and bigger than that takes over. The Democrats' current legislative supermajority is dangerous. It threatens to turn what has been a duopoly into a monopoly. A system of checks and balances gives way to destructive steamrollers. This move towards ranked choice and proportional representation will make a whole lot of people think that politics can make a whole lot more sense than it does now.
All right, now we move to Leo.
I'm not familiar with the term ranked choice. Maybe it means something else that I'm not familiar with. Is there any way you could elaborate on that?
It's a choice where voters go into the voting booth, and if there's 10 candidates, they can put the order, their favorite, next favorite, third favorite, fourth favorite.
Okay.
And it avoids runoffs and also allows for more candidates to be considered and not be called spoilers.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely wanting to get rid of this whole top two system that we have, especially the jungle primary that we have in California. That's something that needs to go. We definitely need to have more representation for all parties. I would look at something more for, I'd say, finding a way to have like 5 major parties get better representation at the very least, and at least 2 candidates for representing each would be ideal in my world. I don't know about necessarily the ranking system, but it's something to look into. I'd like to see what the California people would think about that before implementing it.
All right, and Reinette.
Back in October of 2020, I wrote a 30-page blueprint for California known as a contract with Californians. And one of the items I have in there is actually for ranked choice voting. And I think it's an idea that's time has come, and I think we need to seriously consider it for a multitude of reasons. Basically, it's a single winner voting method that allows voters to actually choose not just one, but a number of candidates. So they can actually really be quite true to their heart and their considerations. And there's many things that I like about this. You can be much more expressive with the kind of vote you have, and it also allows us to eliminate a lot of spoiled ballots. It's much more difficult to have spoiled ballots. And you also, and the good thing too is, the ballots look the same, so it's still similar to the ballots we see today. And it also allows us to remove splitting almost entirely, any of those spoilers. And it's just, the system right now is not working with the two-tiered system here, the 2 top vote getters. And to be honest, To go beyond this, we also need to make sure that we get big money out of our election cycle. So even if we do move into this ranked choice voting, we have to get corporate personhood under control, and we have to remove that before we can really have the type of election results that we all deserve.
All right, next question, and we'll start this one with James. This question came from a member of our American Solidarity Party California leadership, and he speaks from his experience with autism. And his question: the frequency of autism diagnoses has been on the increase in recent years, and many autistic individuals have concerns about therapies which they deem abusive by ascribing the condition to controllable behavior rather than sensory inabilities. Autistic adults are also hampered by low employment rates. What would you do to raise employment levels among autistic workers and to foster favorable work environments? And what changes would you institute to help autistic individuals to feel that the state is listening to their needs? And I think this is a question where if you wanted to get a little bit wider and deal with all kinds of challenges that subpopulations face, you might deal with those as well.
This is a tough set of questions, and we need to do some hard thinking about them. A first step is to get to know personally people with autism and become familiar with schools that have special programs for young people on the autism spectrum. It would be a help as well to sit in on an independent education plan, IEP, independent education plan meeting. A second step, and easier to take, is to get a good look at the Autism Society website. What it says about autism therapies is perspective. Let me share some key points just from 2 lead paragraphs. While there is no known cure for autism, there are treatment and education approaches that can address some of its challenges. Intervention can lessen disruptive behaviors, and education can teach self-help skills. But just as there is no one symptom or behavior that identifies people with autism, there is no single treatment that will be effective for everyone on the spectrum. Parents and professionals have been confounded by conflicting messages regarding which appropriate treatment options. Each person responds to treatment differently. We cannot, and this is the Autism Society, we cannot endorse any one treatment or program. Families should educate themselves about all options and choose what they think is the best interest of their child and family. Now, a couple thoughts on my own. Employment challenges also differ widely. Employers should be open to reasonable accommodations. At the same time, different jobs demand specific skills.
That's time. Time's up.
Whoa, that was quick.
Yeah, 2 minutes goes fast, doesn't it?
Can I borrow 30 seconds to continue?
You may.
The policy, and I want to do something specific. The policy of paying autistic persons sub-minimum wages. Paying autistic persons sub-minimum wages, it's misguided and easily exploited. State departments of education and labor should meet regularly with autistic people and make their actions open for public review.
Okay. Okay, I think it's Leo's turn for his shot at this question.
Okay, thank you. Well, there's different types of autism. So to come up with a blanket fix for this, I think would be very difficult. And there are definitely different jobs that would be more beneficial to have for people with certain types of autism. Putting in the legislature to mandate this, or I hate using that word mandate, or to make this, favor a certain type of person for employment. I'm against that favoritism when it comes to that. I do want to see people who have disabilities be able to have fair employment. However, if they're not fit for certain jobs, we shouldn't be forcing employers to take on and to take on people that wouldn't necessarily be the best fit. I definitely think that's something that should be more up to the discretion of businesses. However, like I said, there are absolutely jobs out there for people who have disabilities.
All right. And then the next one for this question is Reinette.
All right. Wait for your timer. Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, listening to autistic individuals and hearing their concerns is the first place to start. Hearing from them directly kind of gives us a guidance as where to fill in the gaps and where to best serve them. The other thing that's really important is we do need to create a licensing board in California for board certified behavioral analysts, that's the BCBA. Several states have this, and interestingly enough, California has one of the highest rates of autism in the world. And yet the BCBAs are, monitored by the board, but we don't really have them policing that here in California. So that's a nice place to start. And the other thing is that the insurance companies too, they play a large role in this. When they started to see big dollars in the autism world, they started to hire inexperienced staff to work with the autistic population. And this kind of threw all the quality standards right out the door. So we need to grapple with that and lasso that back in and get control. And we should not discredit the autistic adults from what they've went through. We should learn from their history and to ensure that we actually don't repeat it once again. And there's been a lot of misinformation that's been disseminated also about autism, what autistic people can and cannot do. And we need to also correct that. I would also suggest incentivizing businesses to actually hire the autistic population as well. This would help out a great deal. And also, it's really important that we actually allow the families to be involved with their therapy. There's naturalistic play, evidence-based approach, which has been very, very successful. So it's really involving the family members as well. And we also need to make sure that the therapy has a very comprehensive, cohesive whole family learning process, as well as the caregivers. They should also be trained adequately as well for this. And lastly, we need to really start looking into what is causing the massive rise in autism today.
And it's now Robert's turn.
As a research clinical psychologist, my doctorate is in that area. Autism back in the 60s was a rare phenomenon. It used to be infantile autism. For the most part, thanks to vaccines, children and others have been harmed severely. Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. talks about this rather regularly. I've spent some time with him discussing this particular matter. Now we have a spectrum of autism. From Asperger's all the way down to those that cannot be potty trained, don't establish eye contact, and so on. That's just one of the mental deficiencies. I've dealt with schizophrenics, depressive, anxiety disorders, bipolars, and so on. That's my specialty. And with respect to employment, it needs to, that individual, as with, in quotes, normal adults, have to fit that particular job, and they perform well and are creative and innovative, productive. So with respect to the autistic or the schizophrenic, etc., they need special education programs of which teachers are competent to teach them in that particular area based on their particular talents. So autism is just one of the mental ill. It's actually a retardation or developmental disability. We have workshops. We've had workshops for years. I place patients in workshops and in mental hospitals. God bless. Thanks.
All right. And our next question, we will start with Leo. And the question is on the topic of water. What do you see as the important trade-offs that must be recognized, and what would you do to try and solve our water problem?
Well, fixing the water problem here in California is actually quite simple. We really just need to invest in more reservoirs, upgrading the existing infrastructure, and building more desalination. Part of my plan for bringing California out of drought actually includes making California a water exporter, which would bring revenue into the state. We've got thirsty neighbors to the east and to the south. We've got Nevada, Arizona, and Mexico that would really love good fresh water. So by building more reservoirs to capture and harness the snowpack will be the cheapest and most effective way of capturing fresh water that we can use for our farmers and just for citizens in general. And we have the entire Sierra Nevada mountain range that gets tons of snowpack, yet we don't capture it. So we need to really heavily invest into building reservoirs and dams that we can also make have a hydroelectric function at multiple stages on their way down from the high altitude, which would help power California. Desalination along the coast will take the pressure off the inland reserves, and eventually one day we'll be able to pump it east and out of the state. And by upgrading our existing infrastructure, which is crumbling and failing at the moment, we'll be able to harness more and get more out of it. So that's how we're going to do it.
All right. And next with that question is Reinette.
First and foremost, we have $3 billion available that's already been approved bonds, right, by voters. And yet this money has not been used, which is a bit of a mystery. I'm kind of curious as to where that money has gone. And so I don't think we should be borrowing any more money. We should use the money that we have. And the other thing is too, is that the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which is known as the SGMA, is not living up to its intentions whatsoever. Meanwhile, we have dam water being dumped into the ocean. Don't know why that's happening. We need to actually use that water, and once we clean it, not return it to the ocean, but actually recycle it and use it intelligently. The other thing is too, is we need to work on the water recycling altogether and conservation as well. And then we also need equitable water use. And one of the things I was doing, I was on the ground campaigning, and I was talking to a rancher, and he told me that, they're pumping from their own wells out of the aquifer, and there's no meter, and not to charge them for the water, but we have to meter real time. We need to do the real time usage so we can actually better understand the state of our aquifers. We also need to utilize inland sources of brine. We have not been really taking advantage of that. We need much better watershed protection and water neutral development as well. And we need to implement that, and we have not. We also need to ensure that our upper watersheds, the headwaters, are not burning down, because if we lose those upper watersheds, what we're going to do is we're going to have massive fires, and then we're going to lose our drinkable water further on downstream. And I think that's it for right now. Thank you. We've got a few seconds.
All right. And the next person with that question is Robert.
I appreciate the opportunity to address this particular question. The significance is that for many years, I've been involved with water agencies and water boards, state and local. I was on Schwarzenegger's Blue Ribbon Committee to study the Delta and the problems there. After a short while, I caught on that the board itself was just a sham, that it really wasn't going to go anywhere, and the recommendations of the people were not going to be heard anyway. So I withdrew from that Blue Ribbon Committee. I've studied water from Shasta Dam, which is a central water project to provide water only for agriculture. That was the reason for its construction. I've been to the Orville Dam a number of times, and I've even published a book about the Orville Dam. I couldn't find a copy of it to show you. And that's the Orville Dam is extremely important. what we need to do, we need to continue with the Sites Dam proposal and the Temperance Dam proposal. We need off-stream water storage to capture snow melt. There are some certain, I've been all around studying those various areas that have been proposed for other off-stream. We've made serious mistakes not knowing about ecology in the past, and it damaged our, as you know, salmon and trout populations. Because we have constructed dams on rivers, we need to have off-stream. There's energy issues involved in that. Doesn't generate energy. Now, with respect to desalination, it's a very expensive operation. There's one in the San Diego County area. There's one in Huntington Beach. Tremendous issues that have to be addressed there. It is energy expensive. Thank you.
I believe we now have our one remaining person on this question is James.
Today's drought is historically extraordinary. As always, state interventions depend on transparent and ongoing discussions with political and social leaders at every level. State policy should accelerate desalination, groundwater replenishment, wastewater recycling, and reservoir development for rain and snow runoff. Nothing, however, absolves us from personal responsibility. We waste water in huge amounts every day. Pampered yards, private swimming pools, lush golf courses, they're luxuries we can't afford. Many of us in Southern California pretend that deserts can be turned into oases. In the meantime, we forget that there are places in California that have to import bottled water. And we dare not forget that our farms, especially our family farms, vital to our economy, require stable and sustainable sources of water.
That finishes that question, and we will start the next question with Renata.
If I may just have a quick rebuttal.
Yes, you have a minute if you want it.
So in response to Reinette, we would not ever meter our water, our well water, because it's just going to wind up having a cost to it on the farmers. Anybody using well water will be charged for that, and they shouldn't, because it's their land, it's their right to have that water. To Mr. Newman, we can, I know it is energy intensive, but it can be done. That's why we have to also invest into clean energy like nuclear power and even tidal power, which would take wave energy, so we can get that right there at the source. And then in response to Mr. Hanink, looking at it as like a sin of the luxury for people who want to be able to have that, I think it's well within their rights to have yards and lawns and pools, and people we have people who can afford it can earn that, but we also have to be able to provide the infrastructure. That way we can do it. We haven't upgraded our infrastructure in over 40 years, and it's time to heavily invest into California's water, because it is the foundation of life and it is the foundation of California's economy.
Not to mention their wet sidewalks all day long because of their faulty sprinkler systems.
James, let's not interrupt each other, okay?
Brian?
Yes.
May I elaborate slightly on what is being discussed so far? I'm Robert Newman.
Are you talking about a question, or are you talking about a general procedure here? Okay, you may take your minute on water then.
Okay, very good. An excellent point was made with respect to the Department of Water Resources and how they manage water. Volumes and volumes and volumes of water are sent out to the Pacific Ocean, way beyond keeping marine water from invading the Delta. And so that's a very, very important issue that needs to be addressed. That is the function of the environmentalists dictating policy at our expense. I live on a farm. We pump our water out of our aquifer. I did as a child. Both my wife and I grew up on small farms. We had our own well. we know the value of water and water wells. I have livestock on the farm and I have crops here. I don't irrigate at this point in time because of my candidacy issues. That's sufficient. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, Brian, I do want to just respond to Leo. I'm wholeheartedly against ever charging for well water, whether it's residential or farm or ranch or orchard. So just be very clear on that.
All right, I guess we've covered water.
We're all wet, yes.
Yeah. And okay, I said we were going to start with Reinette, and I guess this is a related question because closely related to water is fire. As California's fire seasons have become longer and more severe, what do you see as the most important steps we must take to confront the problem? Reinette.
Well, first of all, I have to say, unfortunately, the way it works these days, fire prevention is much more of a moneymaker, or sorry, less of a moneymaker than fire suppression. And so if we were to, fire suppression is more money-making than fire prevention. So we've noted that there's a lot of money to be made once a fire starts. And so what I've been really looking at right now is we need to focus on how to restore our watersheds and our forests. And we can do that by better forest management, of course. So we're looking at programs, for instance, like brush clearing, tree thinning, and of course, even, for instance, goat and sheep grazing, which I've done in my own town of Nevada City. We're very close to the town of Paradise, so we do take this very seriously. The other thing I think you have to really start looking at is using the California Conservation Corps and expanding that, because one of the things is we do not have the man and woman power to go out there and actually clear our forests. Included with that, I'd also highly suggest that we really expand the indigenous cultural burning as well. This is something that can actually assist us on a large scale. And also the other thing is too, is there's a New Mexico's Rio Grande Water Fund, which is a brilliant, successful program that uses GPS mapping, overlay of different kind of mapping to identify in the headwaters the most precarious areas for our water sources. And they are able to actually identify the areas that need to be treated, targeted treating, which is reduce the catastrophic fires, which is also reduce the mudslides and so on that damages our waterways. And of course, later on further downriver, destroys industry and also water plants and so on. So I would actually utilize the restoration of our forests and watersheds as a mechanism to actually rebuild a lot of our local economies in towns in the forested areas, because we know our towns or our forests better than anyone else does in California. So we can actually boost up our own local economies by doing this.
All right. And Robert, you are next.
Since I live in the country, I'm very familiar with fire issues and the fire fear phenomenon. I'm also very much aware of the massive increase of homeowner insurance in rural areas. With respect to addressing the specific question, which has been addressed many times by many, is that we need a sensible thinning of the forest, and that is lumbering. We need to clear brush under power lines. That's something that's happening in this area. I see it regularly. I have trees along the road, and Edison, the power company here, then hires a tree trimming company. So those are the things we actually need to do. But it's what's really happening is that the cost of all of this is passed on to the rate users. Whomever buys electricity from the power company helps pay for their errors of not taking care of things in a timely sort of a way. So cleaning underbrush and also thinning the forest, creating income through lumbering, And it's already been mentioned, indigenous people that have a tradition of burning to protect their land. They make sense. This is mainly happening in the northern counties, Siskiyou and Modoc and South. So it's not done in this area because it's not part of their tribal heritage. I'm in favor of leaving the Native Americans alone to manage their land as they choose. Thank you.
Okay, and the next person on that question is James.
Wildfires are linked to climate change. Perhaps the most crucial step in confronting our new normal is dealing with climate change. A livable environment is a core dimension of the common good. Care for our planet, including California, requires government regulation. That regulation must always consult local and regional groups, be incremental, and be open to public review. Government has a role to play in combating wildfires. Its policy must make sure that firefighters have the necessary means to do their jobs, that foresters have the know-how and support they need to do their jobs, and that development is restricted in isolated areas. To which I might add, there is always our personal responsibility. Just as we should limit our carbon footprint, we should avoid building in areas at risks for wildfires. We should educate ourselves about the principle of good forest management. And we should recognize the sad reality of arsonists and prosecute them vigorously.
All right, and your turn, Leo.
Well, wildfires are a huge problem in California. I've actually had to deal with them quite a bit here, even here in Los Angeles. I've had to evacuate my home 3 times in the last 5 years, and I was lucky to come back to it. Part of my plan for helping curb these wildfires that we're seeing is by is complementary to my water building, my water reservoir building process, which will have more water readily available near where there will be sites. We have to also bolster our firefighters by giving them more tools. We need more planes, we need more helicopters, and we need more ground crews. And we're going to do that by lifting restrictions and making it a lot easier for people to actually join the fire department. It's actually very difficult right now. On top of that, underbrush clearing is absolutely something we must do. It's something the Native Americans figured out hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. So we have to be able to adapt and learn to live in our environment. On top of that, part of my homeless solution, which will help to combat this with folks that are in the program, learning how to do basic firefighting. So they'll be able to do that, as well as getting more prisoners to come out and be just hand crews and clearing out brush, as well as doing back burning and fire road upgrades. There's also the bark beetle is a huge problem that we have here in California. So we really need to go out and take out the trees that are infected with the bark beetle and find a way to eradicate them from our forests. So whether that includes using logging companies, so be it. But we need to do that because it's an invasive species that's destroying our beautiful forests. Thank you.
Okay. And I believe on the next question, we're starting with Robert. And the question is this. Homelessness has become a major concern in California and across the nation. What would be your approach to addressing this situation?
Thank you. I appreciate that opportunity. Since I live on a farm, pastors in the area have referred homeless couples to us because we have residences on the farm, 10 by 50 mobile homes. And my wife and I, have rehabilitated a number of the homeless. We've had a number of years' experience with that. It is a big challenge dealing with individuals. Now, with respect to homelessness, I see 3 different categories. One is the mentally ill and the drug affected. I worked the state hospitals in California. They were a wonderful, wonderful system that treated people and got results. That was back in the 60s in particular. Now, those people can be 5150 and placed into a facility, a state hospital. One other category, that's the biggest category. Another category is those who have fallen on hard times. My position about that, and there's minimal taxpayer expense in this program, that they first are treated by their family who exhaust their resources, then they're handled by the church, and churches have been completely irresponsible in that regard. And after that, charitable organizations and nonprofits. Then the government steps in. Last, minimally, there's another category, and that is those, and it's a smaller category of those who have fallen on hard times. Those want help, and they can get help. Another group is those who choose to be homeless. We have treated them here, and they've been excused from the farm forcefully. Thank you. God bless.
All right. And the next person with that question is James.
Let's first make an effort to talk with homeless people, especially in our neighborhoods and where we work. Let's remember that some of the homeless are not so very different from ourselves. About 20% of Californians live in poverty, the highest poverty rate in the nation. But many others among the homeless face a range of personal demons. In any case, our policy priority should be to provide basic housing. That opens the way to real change. Mental health outreach is critical. The right medication, and if necessary, court-mandated therapy can help those who suffer from mental illness and turn lives around. Drug addiction ruins lives. How's this for an intervention? The state should seize the assets of methamphetamine producers and suppliers and drive them out of business. Indeed, why not publicly shame them by tattooing their foreheads with the hashtag #methkills? What won't work, the street to jail to street recycling won't work. The infamous Los Angeles Men's Central Jail Twin Towers complex has become the largest mental health facility in the United States.
Okay. And Leo.
Well, the homeless crisis in California is out of control. We're seeing nearly 250,000 people that are homeless on the streets throughout the state. This doesn't just affect places like San Francisco and Los Angeles, but other places like Bakersfield, Fresno, Sacramento, San Diego, you name it. There's homelessness everywhere. My solution for the homeless crisis is first by starting with enforcing vagrancy laws. We have to have something in place where we can actually remove people off the streets. And the root cause of the homeless crisis here is it's drug addiction that's compounded by a mental health crisis that we're having, and it's exacerbated by a poor education system. So I want to be able to provide facilities for these people outside of the cities where they can receive treatment. We have to figure out, all right, who are you? Where are you from? Do you have family looking for you? And then we have to diagnose, do you have a mental illness? Do you have drug addiction? And then provide treatment for those people, which will provide jobs in the medical industry as well as rehab industry. While they're undergoing treatment, they will also be able to learn a job skill, whether that's agriculture, which in my background has given me the most satisfying sense of accomplishment and has carried on to other parts of my life, but also part of my other plans, which will allow them to learn construction skills, firefighting, and sanitation. So that way, when they're ready to go back into the world, they will be earning a living wage while they're doing that. So once they have their drug addiction or mental health under control and they know how to manage it, they'll have a job skill, money in their pocket, and able to go back into society. And any business that hires people coming out of this program will get a tax incentive for hiring them. It's very important that we take care of our people because they are still human beings and they are citizens and they require our help, and it's up to us to help clean this mess up. It's not a permanent solution. It's not a guaranteed solution, but it's going to make a huge impact. And that's why we have to go and do something, because putting them in hotels is not the answer.
And I think we need to give Reinette a chance at that one.
Thank you. Well, first of all, this is a very nuanced problem. Must be dealt with a multi-tiered and multi-pronged approach. It's something I've actually been working on myself and my community for well over 10 years. And unfortunately, Governor Newsom's lack of response has essentially turned California into an open-air insane asylum. And we need to start actually calling California homeless situation what it really is. It's a humanitarian crisis. So when elected, I would immediately declare a state of emergency around the homeless issue. And accordingly, we will also have to ensure current homeless shelters are meeting California standards, which they are not. A lot of homeless people don't want to go into the shelters because they're just squalor. We also need to deploy a task force within individual communities for quick, actionable solutions where we can actually do the triage on the ground. We also need to streamline and fast track low-income housing as well, and homeless shelters. We can do a lot of this through infill development within cities themselves. And then on top of providing shelter, we must also help to break the cycle that traps people, as everyone's mentioned here before, those suffering from mental illness, health issues, mental health issues, drug addiction, alcoholism, and so on. They need that triage, and they need the wraparound services to help them get out of their predicament. And we have to remove them off the streets. This is all about risk reduction to themselves, and risk reductions to the communities and the businesses that they are impacting as well. And also, lastly, this is very important. I met a gentleman by the name of Michael, who was running COTS, C-O-T-S. It's a model community, a homeless shelter in Petaluma. He was for almost 10 years homeless himself, went 9 years through the shelter, ended up the executive director. And he said, we never talk about the spiritual side of homelessness. And that is that the person does not feel like they have a purpose to their lives and their lives matter. They'll never get out of their homelessness. So it's up to us to assist them in finding their purpose so they can elevate themselves and re-enter society.
All right. I believe that finishes that question. And new question. This one starts with James. Are you satisfied with our healthcare system in California? And if not, how would you change it?
No, I am not satisfied with our health care. It's taken the wrong road. What we need is healthcare service. Too often we get a healthcare industry. The basic good of life is at issue, and corresponding to each basic good, there's a basic human right. Where resources are available as they are in California, real healthcare is a right. In honoring that right, the state should promote rather than eliminate the role of intermediary groups. I'm thinking of the healthcare services of labor unions, professional and trade organizations, and religious groups. Government should support a widespread and decentralized network of community hospitals. Private and group medical insurance plans have a role to play, but we should continue to expand Medi-Cal services. No one should be left out. All the while, we should aim for ongoing and frequent public review of our combined healthcare services.
All right. And next we will go to Leo.
No, I'm not satisfied with the healthcare that we have here in California. And I think the best way to change it would be with tort reform, because there are so many lawsuits that take place and they affect good doctors to be able to do their job. There's a lot of bogus claims that are made for malpractice. Don't get me wrong, there are legitimate claims for malpractice, but there are far more that are illegitimate than are legitimate. And that's actually hurting people from being able to be the best in these fields. We're seeing a total lack of good education for doctors. We need to really help. We need to reinvest in our education system to have better use, especially the UC system, for providing better schools. We want to make sure that anybody who's going to become a doctor is willing and ready to do their independent research and not just accept what is given to them or dictated to them by organizations like the WHO or the CDC. So we need a lot of things to change here in California. So yes, tort reform, I think, would be one of the big key starting points for that.
And now we go to Reinette.
Thank you. So basically, real public health has been under attack for decades by what I would call a corporate multinational industry that's primarily concerned with profit and not really people's health. And so we've all experienced this in our own interactions with the medical system over the years, and traditional community public health resources, infrastructure, personnel have also been systematically dismantled and also degraded while being captured essentially and directed by corporate entities that have profit as their primary motive and not actual good public health practices instead. So nevertheless, we still need to do some strong foundational health or create strong foundational health systems. And some of the things we can really focus on is looking for bottom-up solutions. The other thing we need to also do is empower doctors, nurses, and other healthcare providers to be actually independent voices within their very communities. We also need to really encourage alternative therapies for veterans, which I hope to continue to see expanded. And we also need real rural community doctors, nurses, and healer programs. I'm in a small town, and we barely have enough doctors to cover the population that we have. This is a real concern. The other thing is also let's talk about real health. Let's talk about community gardens. Let's talk about the fact that we don't talk about our diet, the fact that we need to eat properly. It's good to grow our own food, get outdoors, get sunshine, have exercise, ensuring that our children in schools are actually getting the outdoor time and the physical education so they start off healthy as children. And then we need to also expand the CalFresh program to ensure those who don't have a lot of money do have access to good, healthy food. It can also expand community centers. I also suggest intergenerational daycare. We have the young and the old. There's that mental, emotional health as well that's connected to our physical health, just to name a few things.
Robert, I think we still need to give you a turn on this one.
I appreciate the opportunity to share my own experiences. I was a fee-for-service doctor. I'm in favor of fee-for-service. With respect to medical training, it's pretty much comparable, whether it's at an Ivy League school or a podunk school or a foreign-trained physician. It's actually the residency that determines quality of physician, if the person has quality to begin with. Now, Big Pharma has dominated medical training. Second year medical school is pharmacology. I took a number of courses in psychopharmacology. Now, with respect to the system, I already explained fee for service, but a humanitarian doctor. I myself, not patting myself on the back, saw Medi-Cal patients initially and got sued 3 times. I stopped seeing Medi-Cal patients. I would see them if they were referred to me by reasonable referral sources. I would see them for no fee and assume full responsibility for their care. That's what a quality physician, psychologist, psychiatrist would do. Our system is problematic because of the system itself, not necessarily because of profit in hospital or profit in doctor, but because of the mindset of who we are as people and what our responsibility is to other individuals. I live about 15 miles from the Loma Linda University Medical Center and the VA, which is just down the street and across the street from my office. I saw many physicians and their families and dealt with the issues that they deal with. I worked the burn unit at County Medical Center, and I know about that system. I've been in surgeries and consulted in the ER, so I have some experience. Thank you.
All right. I apologize. I messed you up on time a little bit there. Yeah. And we're to the next question, I believe. And I believe this goes first to Leo. And the question is this. Realistically, a third party or politically independent governor would face a heavily Democratic Party legislature. How would you maneuver in that situation to achieve your program?
By using the power of the internet, we have to expose and make everything, all these people that are in government, and make things transparent. This is really more of a question about how to deal with corruption, in my opinion. We have to make things transparent in our government. You have a lot of people that are elected into office and they do not accurately represent their constituents. And we need to make that readily available for everyone in California to see who isn't and who is voting on certain measures or bills or props, and why, and push that question. We have to constantly hold these people accountable because they are public servants, and that's exactly what I intend to be. Everybody who's going to take a public office needs to operate under that modus operandi, because if they don't, then they are not serving the people of California. I absolutely intend to make things transparent here in California, because no more will I put up with any of this ridiculous corruption and lack of progress, because it only hurts the people of California. We need to bring, like I said, transparency.
Reinette, you get the same question.
Well, first and foremost, ever since the Citizens United versus the FEC, we have now had big money in our campaigns. They now equate, donations, political donations, with freedom of speech. So we have to bring a complete end to corporate personhood. Until that happens, we can expect just more of the same, which is complete corruption in our political environment that we're dealing with today. The other thing that's also very important, and I was pushing this actually back in 2012 when I was mayor of Nevada City, and that is we don't really have a measurement for the performance of our representatives. The closest thing we have to any kind of measurement of our wellness is the GDP, and oil slicks and cancer and death and so on, and catastrophic fires add to the GDP does not reflect the representation that we need. One of the things that I would actually do here in California is every year have Californians take what's called a wellness index survey to actually see how well our representatives are doing. What we can do is, this is based upon, by the way, the country of Bhutan, who does the same thing. And we can ask questions like, do you have access to clean water? Do you feel safe in your neighborhood? Do you feel your elected officials are actually representing you? And we can actually drill that down to every single zip code. And this is non-identifying information. And this will actually allow us to actually grade our elected officials. And we continue to see, for instance, a certain community that is saying we do not feel safe in our community, we can let our elected officials know you have 1 year to clean it up, and either we're going to recall you or we're going to remove you. And if we were really, really smart, back in Rome, they actually had this incredible tradition where they would literally every single year vote out the worst politician in Rome. They would ostracize them, and they'd literally throw them out of Rome for 10 years and not allow them to return. Perhaps we can do that here in California. We actually rank our elected officials, and the worst one gets thrown out of politics for 10 years until they clean up their act and they can return.
And I believe it's Robert's turn.
Well, thank you. It doesn't seem to me that it has to be a third-party individual. I think we're facing that disaster in California right now. Now, I mentioned earlier about jurisdiction. Each has a job description. The governor and the elected members of the executive branch, and the lawmaking body, the legislature. And then we have a Supreme Court to evaluate constitutionality of something, a problem, a law that's referred to them. Okay, but the governor decides whether yes or no to accept. Thank you very much for your opinion. I've been an expert in court a number of times. I merely render an opinion. Whether the jury hears it, responds, it's their call. Now, with respect to the governor, I indicated no mandates, no dictating what people do and don't do, leave the people alone to make their own decisions, assume responsibility for those decisions, positive or negative. The governor can influence, impact, suggest to the legislature about various aspects of how things work in California. The legislature makes those laws. The governor is not to control. But the problem we're facing right now is that the legislature does not tell the governor, this is not in your jurisdiction. You do the governor's task, we'll do lawmaking tasks. So it doesn't have to be a third individual. Blessings. Thank you.
Okay. James, I think it's your turn.
Yes, a preface. I would give not 3 cheers to transparency and effective use of the internet. I would give 4 or 5 cheers. However, anybody who's gone through the Secretary of State website, and all of you have, know that there's mountains of transparent information there. The question is, the transparency has to be addressed and directed and shaped and formed. As a university professor, I could tell the students about the mountains of transparent information available for them in the library. The question would be to get them to use it. So in order to get past that while using it, nonetheless, I think the governor needs to be in a regular consultation with a whole range of groups that make up what we might call civil society. The governor needs to speak directly to the labor unions, directly to professional organizations, directly to schools and universities, and directly to the communications media and religious leaders. To that, I would add that the governor, who has so much to say about the government, can use a bully pulpit. I would directly address the people, and I would do so frequently. And last but not least, I think governors talk to other governors, and you get a group of governors, and a group of governors that are speaking clearly and together oftentimes outweigh the voice of the legislature.
All right. We start the next question with Reinette. And that question is, companies across the nation are struggling to find enough workers to function. What would you do to tackle the ongoing worker shortage?
Well, first and foremost, I have to say that over this last 2 years, we have incentivized keeping people home and not working. I've traveled across the United States, state by state, and I've been horrified by how many restaurants and cafes I've come into. And we actually see the owners saying, you know, we only have curbside or we only have counter service because I only have 1 staff. Nobody wants to work. That's a real problem. So I was taught as a child that my work is an extension of who I am as a human being and how I show up. So we actually really started teaching children through the school system that the work is an extension of themselves. We also need to encourage young people to start entering into the trades and learning how to do carpentry work and to do electrical work and how to farm and so on. And then encourage them to actually go out there and make that living. Because right now what's happening is we are literally painting people into a corner where they will have no option but to be on the dole from the United States or the California government, which is a very tricky situation to be in because there are always strings attached to something like this. So I think that it has to start with educating young people in the school system, teaching them how to use their hands, how to critically think, to encourage them to work, let them know that actually working and how they show up is an extension of themselves, and then go out there and really showcase the fact that being an electrician or anything else, a restaurant owner, a carpenter, a contractor is actually a bona fide, respected job.
Okay. And Robert, you get a shot at that same question.
One of the profound things that Sigmund Freud said is work is intrinsically worthwhile. We get to express our novelty, we express our values, we can be creative. That is extremely important. The problem we face in California is not that there are an insufficient number of people who can work. They're, by the movement of our glorious government, that's tongue in cheek, that we have decentralized incentivized working. That is a disaster for people who don't produce something that's meaningful to them. I grew up on a small farm with a work ethic. By the grace of God, we have what we have today because we worked and didn't play. So, in this regard, then, we need to, as has been mentioned, teach a work ethic to young people by parental demonstration, role models. This disaster that our government has helped create creates the next generation, the generation after that, that government will take care of you. If government takes care of you in one way, government can take that away in other ways if people are not paying attention. People drink excessively, alcohol, get involved in drugs, illicit activity, overweight, etc., because they are not reporting to work, and that's disastrous for our economy and individual psyche. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And James, you get the next shot.
Yes, the statistics on workers not returning to their jobs are fluid. They really are fluid, and it seems like that's not so much the case as it was even a month ago. I'd also like to know what some of these specific practices are that drive workers away. That said, I would call for and participate in employer-employee roundtables on basic questions, salaries, hours, flexibility, and working conditions. But I would like to do a lot more than that. We need to talk about what makes a job worth doing. Good and honest work transforms and develops us as persons. It changes our environment for the better. It's collaborative, community building. But many people find their jobs to be mind-numbing and the products of their work to be of little human worth. Bottom line profits do not always translate into work worth doing. Some examples, I can think of all kinds of retail jobs that involve selling stuff that's pretty much junk to begin with. I can think of all kinds of advertising jobs that are really all about developing artificial desires. I can think about all kinds of finance jobs that really involve making money without really having any productive grounds for that money. And I can think about all kinds of entertainment jobs that just make it easier and easier for us to entertain ourselves to death.
All right. And Leo.
Well, California has a big issue with becoming a nanny state and essentially a welfare state problem. It's definitely disincentivizing people to go to work, and this COVID garbage has just exacerbated that tremendously. But even before COVID happened, having been in my family's business in agriculture, we did have issues with getting folks to come to work because they didn't find those jobs attractive. But I'll tell you what, from experience, having worked in a slaughterhouse, on ranches, in a hatchery, doing sanitation, I mean, these are all honest days' works, and people need to understand that. So we do that through education, and we have to bring back things in education like home ec and shop class. But we also need to give people the ability and the tools to manage their money better with accounting and economics. Those are going to be key for helping people stay out of debt and able to earn more. Also, we have to lower business taxes. That way, businesses have the ability to bring on and hire more workers, and also allow people to create and start their own businesses for themselves by removing regulations. Also, we have to stop hiking up minimum wage, because minimum wage is pricing people out of work, believe it or not, because more and more you're seeing businesses and industries go into automation because of the extremely high minimum wage. Minimum wage costs in any business account for about 40% of any fixed costs. So we have to stop hiking that up. It also devalues the US dollar when you increase the minimum wage, and it makes everything more expensive for everybody. And we also have to look at getting rid of the central bank.
And I believe everybody had a shot at that question. And so we move on to the next question. And Robert, you get this one first.
Yes.
Oh, I was afraid you were telling me that I had missed somebody on the last question.
Let's hear it.
All right. Worker-owned businesses have gained attention, both with startups and cases of workers buying their businesses rather than seeing them shuttered. Stories of unions demanding ownership stakes as part of negotiations, or even stories of owners choosing to give their workers some or all of the company. How important is this trend, and should it be encouraged? And if so, what policy proposals would you suggest?
I think the decision is entirely up to the business owner, whatever industry that is. I just have to be very familiar with a company that has trucks on and off this farm in large numbers, especially in the past. They went to a employee ownership. It's doing just fine. That's a company decision, not impacted, meaning forced on them by government moving in one direction or another. Now, the issue that we deal with is unions in this regard, automation as well as robotics. But with respect to unions, I am emphatic about private unions doing what they are capable of doing and influencing their employees and or members and taking care of them in various ways. I'm very much opposed to government unions, SEIU, and so on and so forth. So back to the issue of the owner of the company perpetuating the company in the best way possible with the profit margin being sufficient, whether that's turned over to the employees or whether that the company owns it. People don't realize how many hours, except one person on this panel, how many hours that family put into second and third generation to make that company go. And then it's negatively impacted by regulation and taxation and increased minimum wage. Thank you.
All righty. And next we go to James.
Yes, I'm strongly in favor of all of these developments. It's by working together that we develop ourselves. It's by working together that we form communities. It's by working together that we really change the world around us in a way that promotes the common good. I would do everything I can as governor to make startup loans available for this sort of activity and across the range of particulars that you suggest. I would advocate tax breaks. I would promote credit unions. I would promote, to begin with, profit sharing. I think we have two models that have dominated contemporary life, and I think both of them are misguided. First model is socialism, and socialism, properly understood, the state owns the means of production and communication and distribution. And capitalism, it's capital, the sources of capital that do all of this. The real focus should be on the widest property ownership that we can bring about. The real focus should be on the widest ownership of the means of communication, of production. The real focus should be on the worker, but not the worker as directed by the state, and not the worker is held on the tightest leash possible by owners, but workers should be encouraged to exercise their own genius. And that's sometimes called distributism. And I would certainly encourage people to look into it. It's a people-first economy. It's the widest possible spread of ownership that we can have.
All righty. And next it goes to Leo.
No, worker-owned businesses is something that needs to be figured out with the owners of those companies. If it works best for them, and that's the decision they want to go, then so be it. But forcing that by law, this socialist concept of dispersing ownership in that manner by government decree, absolutely not. If management or ownership for better sees a good way of incentivizing productivity by offering up ownership pieces of a company, yeah, that makes sense. If that's the route they want to go. But again, government having a say in something like that's completely ludicrous. And I would question anybody who would force something like that and wonder if they had ever been in or owned a business. Unions, they're difficult to work with from my own personal experience. The concept to folks who don't understand them, it does sound like a good thing. And in a lot of cases, it can be. However, unions have been hijacked and essentially been turned into rackets, taking advantage of misinformed or underinformed employees. And they always have ever increasing dues and diminishing returns. And those extra dues that get put on the employees affects their take-home dollars, and also the effects that are imposed on businesses make their costs higher, which in turn causes the price of whatever product they're producing to increase. And it's just a repeating negative cycle. So it's up to the business owner. This is a free market. This is capitalism. This is how it works in this country.
Reinette.
After these last 2 years, I have gotten the sense, campaigning up and down the state, that most Californians are really, really tired of the government meddling in their business. And I have very little confidence in the leadership of our government. And I would have little confidence in the meddling in our business ownership. If somebody does want to start, which I have in my community, we do have some employee-owned co-ops, which is wonderful. This was the decision made internally by the owners. Beautiful. And I think it's a great way to incentivize ownership of your productivity, of showing up, right? Of how you, your sales force and how you interact with the public and your customers and so on. Wonderful. But again, this should be determined by the owners themselves. I think what we really need to do instead is actually focus on reducing the overhead and the costs of ownership of a business. When you look at employee tax, when you look at workman's comp, when you look at the fact that you have to pay your sales tax on all of your equipment and those items in your business over and over and over every single year, that money is going into the state rather than going to the employees. So when we talk about raising the minimum wage, we could actually just start paying employees more if we didn't have to have so much overhead and so much red tape to start with. So at this point in time, I support wholeheartedly anyone starting an employee co-op, but this has to be determined by the business owners themselves. And I think we've now seen clearly that our government, once you give them the inch, they think them a ruler. And I do not feel comfortable whatsoever with our government interfering with businesses and how they conduct their business.
Okay, I would like to point out that I wrote some of these questions, and a lot of the questions were contributed. There was a Google Docs place people could add some questions. And so I'm going to ask that same question again slightly differently. Each of you have focused on government requiring things, and I would like to rephrase it in the sense of governments supporting some things. For example, recently in Oregon, a fellow who had built up quite a nice business as a grain mill, flour maker, wanted to retire. And so he went ahead and arranged it in such a way that he could sell his business to his employees, and it became an employee co-op. That's the kind of thing that government could encourage by making favorable tax decisions to a businessman who wants to do that and sell to his employees. It could be done a number of other ways. And so I would like to know if you believe there are some ways that government not enforcing things, but could instead, by adjusting tax laws and other things like that, encourage such a change. And let's go with the same order that we had before. Let's start with Robert on that question.
Hey, I don't want my glorious government messing with anything that I do, as long as it does not contaminate the environment or create social problems, which I should be able to, being an intelligent adult, work out anyway. I'm very much in favor of government being a consultant, offering, as UC California Davis does to farmers, that government provide information, and then the farmer in this case make the decision as to what to do. I'm not in favor of my glorious government taking my tax dollars to support anybody else's business. I'm in favor of, I develop my own business at my own risk, at my own expense, at my own sacrifice, and I don't want government to, in quotes, help me, because basically that means they are helping to control me, and I'm a full-grown adult with an advanced education, and I don't need a high school dropout in government, that's exaggerated, helping me make decisions when that person lives at home with mama who does the ironing and the washing, etc. I really do appreciate this question, so I can express myself from my heart. Yes, less government and education from government. That's sufficient.
All right. And the next question goes to James.
No, same question.
Same question, yeah.
Yes, let's do it right.
Same question, all right. I have nothing personally against libertarians. I have nothing personally against capitalists. I think they're both deeply misguided. We thrive as people when we work together in a way that emphasizes the community. Now, I'm not interested in the government taking things over by no stretch of the imagination. And while I have been known to interrupt marginally a response that I thought was misguided, I'm not interrupting now when I say that it's not a matter of government takeover, it's a matter of government assistance. And I did say that what we can do to promote widespread worker ownership and widespread home ownership is to make loans available for this sort of activity. I advocate tax breaks. I promote credit unions. I promote profit sharing. And I would like to introduce the notion of community banks that we haven't spoken of nearly enough. One way that small businesses can grow and develop and be close to the people who run them, as opposed to actually being picked off by monopolies one at a time, is to have community banks that will give them the loans that are necessary to get the small businesses going. And I think if owners consult with workers, they will oftentimes find that a worker participation improves the company through and through. And we can discuss these things without claiming that somebody is hiding behind mama's apron.
Robert, did you want use up your other minute right now?
No.
Okay. And
it's nice to see some smiles on some of the participants. We're livening up this thing.
wait till you hear the next question. But we're still on this question, and it's Leo's turn.
Well, I fail to see any positive from this. government involvement or encouragement of something like this, it only seems to breed more of the concept of socialism and, the whole workers of the world unite, take down big businesses. I find it absolutely unnecessary and a waste of government time. If employees of a business want to find a way to take ownership and ownership is reluctant, well, then they can get together, they can formulate a business plan and on how they can, find a way to, adequately request the ownership portion they'd like. They can go to banks that would back and fund them, but they have to put a business plan together. I mean, everybody has to go through these steps. It sounds like a lot of work, but you know what? So is building a business and from the ground up and sustaining it. And every year is a fight. So no, I don't see the benefit to that in the slightest.
All right. And Reinette.
So I go back to, once again, if a business owner wants to do some type of employee-owned co-op, I totally support it. What we could do is actually have best practices and tips and tools for anybody interested in that on the different governmental websites to actually assist them so they can be more effective and efficient. But I also have really supported the idea of public banks. California doesn't really have a public bank, though we do have something called the iBank, known as the Infrastructure Bank. And this has been generally used for infrastructure projects. Now, if we really wanted to, we could actually expand the iBank so that it's not just for infrastructure, but it could be expanded to actual mom and pop shops, mainstream businesses that have shuttered over the years, small, mid-sized, large manufacturing. And what the benefit of this would be is that if we became our own public bank, then we could actually give loans instead of at 5%, 8%, and to a big bank where the money is exported out of the state and lost, we could actually provide these loans to our own public bank, keep all that money, all that interest in California, so we kind of increase that economic multiplier effect. And then we can also have it so that it's not 5 or 8%, but it's 0.25%. So we can actually jumpstart the economy. This would also allow other people who would like to break into owning their own business, who they could actually afford it. Now, what could be tied to this to ensure that the loan is repaid, they actually have to take some courses on business management, finance, taxes, and so on, so they could actually have a better opportunity and chance of actually having a successful business.
All right. And the next question, we started with Robert on that one, right?
Yes.
So this one starts with James. I did toss an extra question there. I suspect we'll make up some time on this one. Where do you stand on the question of universal basic income?
We need an ongoing and informed public discussion of universal basic income, UBI. These programs should always begin at the local level. Local experiments will give us a better idea of the various forms, and there are going to be so many forms of UBI programs. We already have some helpful results from a program in Stockton, and something of the sort has been running for years in Alaska, and it's related to the oil revenues, which shift, of course. Now, a good UBI program would eliminate the bureaucratic tangles of means testing programs, and it would reduce the stigma of poverty that comes even with involuntary employment. A misdirected UBI program would undercut the need for job development and job education. In considering UBI programs, we need to understand that work is a basic human need. In our work, we change the world around us. We develop ourselves as persons. It's a tragedy when people who can work don't have jobs. There is, of course, a link here with education. Increasingly, jobs that provide a living wage call for advanced skills. And since I have 1 minute remaining, I want to say, Robert, if Freud actually said what you said he said about work and its importance, my estimation of him has gone up by at least 100%.
Hallelujah.
Are you done there, James?
Yes, I am.
All right. Same question goes to Leo.
It's an emphatic no to universal basic income. It's socialism. I'm sorry, but what that does is it totally undermines people's incentive to go back to work. I mean, we had the question about the worker shortage. I mean, that right there is only going to exacerbate that further. Why would anybody work when they get their guaranteed money? And also that devalues the value of the currency. And you have to also remember, where does that money come from? It doesn't just come out of thin air. It comes out of taxpayers' dollars. It comes from the people who actually work. So why would so it would disincentivize everybody to go to work. Well, why would I go to work if I know that my money is paying for other people who don't want to work because, well, they're just going to get their basic income? It's such a ridiculous concept. Now, the only way I would ever say that universal basic income would work is if we had a surplus of money in our state without having to tax anybody. So if we were able to provide everything, all the essential things that the state has to provide for, had that covered. Say we got it from, whether it was we were pumping oil and exporting water, and even exporting power. Let's say that was enough to cover all the costs in the state, and we had a surplus. Yeah, then I'd say we could pay the citizens like they do in Norway or Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or whatever. But no, we can't do that at all. No universal basic income. Sorry, folks, but go to work. It's not easy. You think I like waking up and going to work? You think anybody does? If they really love what they do, then it's not work. So my suggestion: do what you love, but don't just sit on your butt.
All right.
Leo.
Same question to Reinette.
I was considering the possibility of UBI over the years, and I have to say, I think we've actually had the test run this last 2 years. It's been a disaster. It's caused the shuttering of businesses. It's made it really burdensome to the owners themselves. And, ideally speaking, it would work, but it does. If you flood the market with more dollars, you're just going to cause inflation, and the dollars are going to be, have less value. So it doesn't even economically work. And you de-incentivize people showing up for employment, and somebody has to make the lattes, somebody has to make the food, pump the gas, take care of the children, childcare. So as I said, I've traveled across the states, and I've seen what is essentially UBI instituted or initiated across the country, and it has wreaked havoc on the U.S. And again, I was a supporter of it a few years ago, but actually seeing it essentially in action, I would have to say no. And when it comes to Alaska, I lived in Alaska for a couple of years, and they get a couple $1,000s a year. That's nice. Kind of pay your taxes. You can kind of pay your bills. You can catch up to some loans or whatever, but it doesn't cause a person not to work for the whole entire year. So when you really crunch the numbers, all you're going to do is you're going to cause inflation. You're going to cause an evisceration of businesses and our economies. And as I said years ago, I supported the concept, but right now, after seeing the last 2 years from personal experience, I have to say no.
Slavery with extra steps.
It's always attached to strings, by the way. Nothing is free. Nothing is free.
That's right.
You have to give something up for that money, and we should know that by now with this government as it currently stands.
Yes.
Most people interrupting.
I believe we've gotten to Robert's turn here.
I truly believe that question has already been answered, that it ruins incentive. I have been on this farm assisting sows, giving birth, farrowing pigs, and I see people at 4:30 in the morning going to work. That's the backbone of America. We talk about the family, we talk about work, and it must be intrinsically worthwhile. The value of work must be in the work performed. That's been in part addressed earlier in these discussions. The heroes are those that are up in the morning and going to work at 4:30 in the morning, not because they love getting up at that time of the morning, because they are responsible citizens. And that level of responsibility, individual responsibility, is truncated when government gets involved with one of these schemes like UBI. I am emphatically opposed to that. I don't want my tax dollars supporting someone who is self-destructing by their own foolishness. Is that clear? Are there any questions about that?
Yes, I've got a question.
Okay, well,
All
save
those
it for later.
hardworking people that have debts stop going to their job if they got $1,000 a year? No, of course not. UBI takes 100 different forms. You're putting everything into a Saudi Arabia bag. It's not.
Where does the money come from, James? Come on.
Well, if you have a UBI that is rightly calibrated, a lot of the money comes from money that's now going via welfare.
Okay, so for 40 million people in California?
And welfare at the same time.
Well, hold on, do the math. 40 million times 1,000. That's $400 billion.
How much do we spend on welfare?
Too much.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, there are all kinds of programs now that are means-tested programs that involve huge bureaucracies to make sure that nobody is cheating. That
Listen,
would be eliminated or greatly reduced if we had UBI. What you have to do is to look at particular programs.
James,
You can't
I would
lump them all
rather
together with
no,
Saudi Arabia.
I would rather invest that kind of money, $1,000 for 40 million people. I would rather invest $400 billion into something that's going to actually lower the cost on living in California, making things more accessible and more affordable for folks. That's a way better way to go about it than just giving people money that they can do whatever they want. They can buy drugs with it. They can waste it.
Rather than have a blue ribbon committee decide how the money is to be spent. Let people decide for themselves.
I would like to actually respond to this.
Thank you.
It's overdue for a certified financial audit on our California government, as well as our operations. I believe that if we do that, we will shore up a lot of the big financial leaks. I don't know where most of our money is going. This will allow us to reduce the taxes that we're having to spend. We can reduce our taxes, which we could also then reduce the overhead, and that includes gas tax. Right now, the biggest thing that we're facing is the fact that people can't afford to live. So if we can afford reduce the cost of living, that is essentially a sense of UBI without disenfranchising those from wanting to work. So I'm just saying, for the last 2 years, we've already had the test run, and we've seen a bit of a backlash, unintended consequences. So I would focus more, rather spend that money doing financial audits so we can ultimately reduce our overhead, reduce our taxes, reduce how much it costs to run a business, and how much we pay to the government to throw our money away. Be better money spent.
Well, a real empirical test wouldn't have one control group fearing for their lives if they were to work.
Excuse me. Trying to ride herd on the conversation, and it has gotten more interesting here. And I've tried to decide who to count the minute for. So I have counted one of these minutes for James and one of these minutes for Reinette. And Robert had his hand up, and as a classroom teacher for 40 years, I like to look at the hand up. So, Robert, this is your minute.
I'm not going to take that entire minute to answer this simple question. I'd like it divided up, but you'll have to do the tabulation. In this context, I'd like to respond to the forensic audit concept and relate that to the comprehensive annual financial report referred to as the CAFR. I've also published on that particular matter. That's the shell game with money in the state of California. With respect to this forensic audit, we had a governor. He was an acting governor right out of Hollywood, and he had a forensic audit. I never heard the outcome of it. I mean, that was a hot potato. So we never heard the outcome of it. It is appropriate. Auditors do it all the time. and then do their, what do they say, best practices? Yeah, pay my bill. And they get paid. Anyway, thank you. I didn't like that. I did it anyway. It's all your fault, Reinette.
I hope people will bear with me here as I'm trying to keep time going. I think we're probably ready to move on to the next question. And that question is, oh goodness, we've almost gone 2 hours. Let's figure that we're going to have this question and then final statements. Governor Newsom has advocated turning California into a sanctuary state for abortion rights, including taking on financial responsibilities to help women in other states come here to obtain their abortions. What is your response to the governor's proposal? And I think we start with Leo.
Sorry, but we're not paying for abortions, and this whole sanctuary state concept, whether it's for abortion or for guns or for illegal immigration, is absolutely just despicable, and it erodes the actual fabric of our Constitution and upends our laws. No, so we actually have to get rid of all concepts of sanctuary state or city or county or whatever. That all has to go. I don't believe the state should dictate to people what they can and can't do when that comes to the topic of abortion or gay marriage or whatever. I want people to be able to make their own decisions. Folks out there are going to not like that, but I mean, unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. And if you don't want to have those things or live those lifestyles, then, don't, and educate your children to make better choices. And if they want to get involved with their religious church or whatever, that'll help, then go that way. But no sanctuary state for anything. And we're not paying for anything.
All right.
Because government, anytime the government pays for it, that's code word for your taxes are going up. It's you. Don't ever forget that.
Right.
It's your money.
All right. And Reinette.
Well, first and foremost, as I say in my campaign, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm a Californian. And I think that the lines within we have our control and our purview should stay within California. I don't think it's up to us to subsidize other citizens in other states, their medical needs. It's not our job to underwrite that. And so there's that. And the sanctuary states, there's a lot of topics that have been coming to the forefront that are very divisive, and they really split communities and they degrade the fabric of communities. So I believe that a governor's business should deal with the state that he is serving, and that's as far as his business should go. So quite simply, I don't support this. And I also believe that essentially, we've been seeing this over the last 2 years now more than ever, that a government's business should end with the skin of the person. I believe in bodily autonomy, and I believe the government's business should really stay out of bodily autonomy. We make their own decisions for ourselves, and those decisions should be pertained to the citizens of that respective state.
All right. And then Robert, it's your turn.
Thank you. Now, with respect to the issue of abortion, sanctity of life is extremely important. To kill the unborn devalues life. And I am emphatic about no termination of pregnancy, and except under extreme circumstances, and I've been a consultant on those matters medically, but also sanctity of life in terms of honoring the elderly for their contribution to society. Now, my wife and I have stood outside with signs about sanctity of life, no abortion, from Sacramento to San Francisco to San Diego and many points in between, because we value life. It's an Old Testament concept of offering our babies to Molech. But now it's not Molech, it's filthy mammon. It is a profit-generating industry, and it is degrading society. It is absolutely disgusting that we have gotten to this point, post Roe versus Wade, we've gotten to this point. It is a travesty of humanity. That's sufficient. I don't want to burst into tears here.
All right. And I believe that leaves James on this one.
Abortion is the deliberate destruction of an innocent human being. Not so long ago, knowing that this is true, the political supporters of abortion spoke in regretful terms of a policy that would make it safe, legal, and rare. Today, California's celebrities and journalists celebrate abortion with the same eagerness that they celebrate their own birthdays. In California, we do not even report abortions to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. But one statistic is undisputed. Since Roe versus Wade, there have been well over 60 million legal abortions in the United States. This ghastly statistic marks a colossal moral failure. It's long past time to come to terms with our failure, and the governor should lead the way. Every abortion is a tragedy. Women surely deserve better. Too often they are isolated and dealing with a wide range of pressures, economic, social, psychological, that push some to accept abortion. For decades now, privately supported crisis pregnancy centers have addressed these pressures in all their forms in order to help women. Crisis pregnancy centers help women at risk for abortion. There are about 160 in this state alone. To their shame, Javier Becerra and Kamala Harris tried to shut them down, and they failed.
Right.
Now the governor, in collusion with Planned Parenthood, wants to use public money to finance and train abortionists and to pay for travel and lodging costs for people coming to the state for abortion. His policy is too big for a mistake. It's an outrage. Governor Newsom, every life is precious.
Amen.
All right. Well, I thank you for all of these answers. And so now that brings us to the closing statements. And we are back to where we started. And Reinette, this is your closing statement.
1 minute or two?
2.
Okay. When I decided to run for governor, the people who were asking me in the state of California said I would be willing to run, but I'm not going to run with just an ordinary campaign. If they're willing to do something extraordinary, I was willing to jump in and give everything I've got, which is actually quite a lot. This campaign is based upon no party affiliation because both parties are completely corrupt by big money. I'm here to serve the people and the planet. The other thing that's very important, and this is a very important foundational piece of my campaign, is that our Constitution is based upon the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. Most people do not know that. Our forefathers were inspired by the indigenous people. Beautiful vessel. There's 2 important components they forgot, though, of this vessel that every vessel should have. The anchor and the compass. The compass being the 7th generation principle. Every decision we make today should serve 7 generations from now. And the anchor, our elders, who are now locked away in nursing homes. We should actually include them in our decision-making of today, look back from the last several generations to ensure for the next 7 generations. That is actually the whole entire principle of my campaign and my platform. In addition, I've also looked at the biggest threats that we are facing here in the state of California, and we're doing the ultimate keto move. We're actually transmuting those into our biggest opportunity, ensuring that we rebuild our pollinator population, our topsoil, expand regenerative farming, ensure our legacy farms are in place, and make sure that we have clean water, clean air, clean soil, clean food to ensure for 7 generations from now. And lastly, I will wrap this up to say, I have been campaigning up and down the state. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that people are done with the 2-party system, and I tell them over and over again, If you vote for red or blue, you're going to vote for a Newsom 2.0. Stop voting for a different the same bird. Big money has infiltrated our campaign system, and we've got to stop now and reboot.
Okay, and next would be Robert.
In summing up, I'd like to indicate that my position relates to sanctity of life, and I'm so proud of the Catholics. They're the only ones I'm working with that really are on this issue on a regular basis. My thrust is legal immigration to deal with the birth rate here in this country, but legal immigration, not just flooding our borders. I'm against critical race theory that says those guys are good and those guys are bad. We need to, in reality, we need to come together. I'm in favor of school choice. I'm in favor of less government, individuals making their own decisions and assuming full responsibility for the outcome of that decision. I'm also in favor of fewer regulations. It destroys formations of business. Individual property ownership. Yes, yes, yes. And we do what we choose to do with what we have earned and develop it in the way that we choose. That means less regulation, less government interference. Government can advise, not government control. And that's sufficient. I appreciate this opportunity. I want to thank you and those who put this together and those who have participated and stimulated some thought.
Thank you, Robert.
For that.
James. Let me get
Yes, I think one thing all of us share is that we're all of us opposed to manipulation, the domination of big money, and public hypocrisy. And I think the Los Angeles Times, which for penance I read every morning, is a case study in what we're opposed to. Particulars. The Times rails against income disparity, but it welcomes the money of the rich and the super rich in its real estate supplement. Big, fat advertising source. It condemns human rights violations, but it takes the money of the Chinese Communist Party. See the China News supplement. If you have a strong stomach, you can read the China News to just see how great life has become in Tibet and what a fine education Muslim minorities are getting, all courtesy of the state. The Times preaches racial and ethnic diversity, which it should, but it barely pays lip service to intellectual diversity. The Times even forgets its own pro-abortion line. It will call preborn human beings babies if they are killed in a car accident. So it goes with media manipulation. Keep your eyes open.
All right. And Leo.
It's clear that the people of this state and this nation do not want another career politician in government. We, the people, truly know this, who truly know this place, we, the people who know the truth about what's going on in this state, want to see change. We are here to make that change. I will bring change to California. My experience at Zacky Farms has given me a huge wealth of knowledge when it comes to agriculture and business. I bring with me solutions to the homeless crisis, to the drought, to wildfires, to education. I want to go after our core foundational issues and no longer treat the symptoms that come from it. Everybody in California is experiencing the same hardships together. And the only way we're going to overcome these hardships is to work together to build a better future. Not build back better, but work together. We need to bring water to our Central Valley. We need to clear out our forests. We need to help uplift our most disenfranchised members of our society. Californians know that there is a problem in our government. We need to heavily invest in making voter integrity one of our top priorities. That way we can ensure that there's transparency and free and fair elections throughout the state. And we have to find a way to bring businesses back to California, lowering taxes all the way through, not just on businesses, but on your sales tax, bringing down the excise tax. These are all things that can and should be done. And I will do that if given the opportunity to be your next governor. I look forward to earning your vote and your support as we move together to taking back this state and this nation together.
What I noticed none of you added in there was your website where people can research you. So can we go through that? And Reinette, would you give us your website?
It's electreinette.com. So it's ELECT, elect, Reinette, REINETTE, electreinette.com.
Thank you. And Robert?
Now, my email address is Newman4, the number 4, governor.com, newmanforgovernor.com. That's Nuevo Hombre, and that's spelled Newman.
All right, thank you. And James?
Dr. James J. Hanink for governor 2022. But I'd prefer if everybody looked at the website of the American Solidarity Party. That's what I'm running about, that whole platform. No cliches, no sound bites, a carefully thought out, comprehensive platform.
And Leo?
You can find me at www.leozacky.com. That's LEOZACKY.com. And you can also go to ovou.me/leozacky to find all my contacts, my contact information, as well as all my social media stuff. I'm verified on Gab and Getter at the moment.
All right. Well, thank each of you. It's been an interesting couple of hours. Like I say, I'm going to have to go back and listen to it to see what everybody said. But I appreciate you participating, and best of success to each of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. A real service.
Thank you, everyone. Nice meeting all of you. Thanks for your service.
Well, best of success to everybody.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you again for this opportunity. It's been wonderful.
Bye-bye now.
See y'all.